Agincourt, a narrow field, a wet morning, and two armies about to collide. The ground is soft, the air is cold, and this mud will decide who lives. In the year 1415, an English army stood trapped in northern France. They were not here to conquer cities or claim land. They were trying to survive. Weeks of cold rain had followed them across the countryside. Food was almost gone. Disease had already killed men before any battle began. Boots were torn apart by mud. Horses collapsed on the road and were left behind. Every mile drained strength from bodies that had nothing left to give. Ahead of them waited the French army, larger, richer, confident. To most of Europe, the outcome seemed obvious. The English would be crushed. Their king would be captured or killed. And this campaign would end in disaster. The English army was retreating toward the coast, hoping to reach safety. Their king understood the truth. His men could not survive another long campaign. They were exhausted beyond recovery. Men coughed through the night. Wounds refused to heal. Supplies vanished faster than they could be replaced. Morale weakened with every step. Then the French blocked the road. There would be no escape, no safe retreat, no second chance. The English were forced to turn and fight. If they lost here, the army would disappear from history. This field would decide whether England returned home alive or vanished forever in foreign soil. The French army believed the battle was already won. Thousands of knights gathered, covered in heavy steel armor polished for display. Their horses were strong and well fed. Their banners filled the horizon. Confidence flowed through the camp. They laughed at the English archers, poor men with wooden bows and little protection. To the French nobility, numbers and armor guaranteed victory. They trusted tradition. They trusted status. They trusted strength. They believed knights were untouchable. They did not fear the enemy, and they did not respect the ground beneath their feet. The battlefield lay between two forests, squeezed into a narrow corridor. Days of rain had turned the soil into deep, clinging mud. Every step sank, every movement slowed. Armor that once symbolized power became a burden. The French saw a killing ground. The English saw opportunity. Wooden stakes were driven into the earth. Archers were placed on the flanks. This was not bravery. It was calculation. If the French charged, they would slow. If they slowed, they would fall. And once they fell, armor would become a prison. The night before the battle was quiet and heavy. English soldiers sat by small fires, sharing almost nothing to eat. Many believed morning would be their last. Fear moved silently through the camp. Men stared into the fire and thought of home. No speeches were given. No promises were made. Across the field, French nobles celebrated. They drank, laughed, and spoke of victory as if it were guaranteed. To them, the English were already defeated. Dawn arrived cold and gray. Fog clung to the ground. The armies prepared to meet their fate. The English archers stepped forward. Bows rose together. The field went silent. Then the sky turned black. Thousands of arrows fell at once. The French charge collapsed almost immediately. Horses screamed as arrows struck their bodies and armor. Knights fell before they reached the English line. Heavy steel dragged men into the mud. Those who slipped could not stand again. Arrows did not need to kill everyone. They only needed to break movement. They only needed to create fear. The advance lost its rhythm. Lines twisted. Commands were lost in the noise. What was meant to be a powerful charge turned into confusion and panic. The battlefield itself became the enemy. Mud clung to legs, hooves, and armor, slowing everything. The French army had not yet reached the English, and already it was losing control. More French soldiers pushed forward from the rear, unaware of the disaster ahead. Bodies pressed together in the narrow field. Movement became impossible. Breathing became difficult. Armor trapped heat and fear inside. Knights slipped and were crushed beneath the weight of others. Skill no longer mattered. Strength no longer mattered. Only space mattered, and there was none. The French army was no longer fighting the English. It was fighting the ground, the crowd, and itself. Panic spread faster than any order could stop it. Steel sank into mud. Strength failed, discipline collapses, panic spreads, and their control disappeared. The English archers dropped their bows. They picked up knives, hammers, and axes. They moved into the chaos without ceremony. This was not heroic combat. It was close, desperate, and brutal. Men in heavy armor could not turn or flee. They were pushed into the mud and held there. Cries were swallowed by rain and noise. Agincourt became a slaughter carried out at arm's length. Knights who had believed themselves untouchable were now helpless on the ground. The balance of power had completely reversed. As the fighting slowed, thousands of French nobles surrendered. They expected ransom. They expected survival. The battlefield seemed decided, but fear did not disappear. Rumors spread of another French force approaching. The English army was small. The prisoners were many. Panic returned. Decisions were made quickly and without mercy. Orders were given that shocked even the victors. Tradition collapsed under fear. Agincourt did not end cleanly. It ended with blood still being spilled and silence spreading across the field. When the noise finally faded, the field of Agincourt did not look like victory. It looked like destruction. Thousands of bodies lay pressed into the mud, armor crushed into the earth. Horses lay still. Weapons were scattered everywhere. English soldiers moved slowly, stunned by what they had survived. Many had never killed before. Now they stood among the dead of France's nobility. There was no celebration, no cheering. Victory felt heavy and unreal. The French army was gone. In a single morning, centuries of confidence had collapsed into silence. As the English gathered themselves, the scale of the destruction became clear. This was not a normal defeat. The dead were not ordinary soldiers. They were the leadership of France. Dukes, counts, lords, and commanders lay face down in the mud. Entire noble families had been erased in a single morning. The battlefield looked less like a place of victory and more like a mass grave. English soldiers searched the fallen not for gold, but for weapons and survivors. Many were too tired to speak. The rain continued to fall, pressing armor deeper into the ground. Agincourt was finished as a battle, but its consequences were only beginning to unfold. When news reached France, disbelief spread faster than grief. Messengers spoke quietly, repeating the same impossible story. The French army had been destroyed. Nobles who left in confidence would never return. Courts fell silent. Accusations followed quickly. Commanders blamed each other. Rival factions argued over responsibility. The French king was ill and weak. The kingdom was already divided. Agincourt deepened every crack. What was meant to be a simple victory had become a national disaster. France had not only lost a battle, it had lost control, confidence, and leadership in a single blow. For the English king, Agincourt changed everything. Before this day, he was a ruler with ambition. After it, he became a legend. Soldiers believed God had chosen him. Songs carried his name across England. His authority at home became unquestioned. Rivals fell silent. Allies listened closely. Agincourt gave him more than victory. It gave him belief. Belief that France could fall. Belief that destiny favored his cause. That belief would guide every decision he made afterward. The battle had turned a struggling campaign into a powerful myth. Over time, Agincourt became wrapped in legend. Writers spoke of honor and courage. Poets turned mud into glory. Fear became bravery. Chaos became strategy. But the truth was darker. This was not a clean fight between noble warriors. It was men drowning in mud, crushed by their own armor, suffocating under the weight of bodies. Panic mattered more than skill. Ground mattered more than bravery. The French did not lose because they lacked courage. They lost because they trusted tradition more than reality. Agincourt exposed a dangerous truth about warfare. Agincourt marked the beginning of the end for traditional knightly warfare. Heavy armor, once a symbol of power, had become a weakness. Noble birth no longer guaranteed survival. Discipline and preparation mattered more than status. Armies across Europe took notice. Leaders studied terrain more carefully. Infantry gained importance. Warfare began to shift away from romantic ideals and toward brutal reality. Agincourt was not just a battle. It was a warning. The world that knights ruled was slipping away beneath their feet, just like the mud that pulled them down. Across Europe, rulers paid close attention to what had happened at Agincourt. This was not ignored as luck or coincidence. Kings and commanders understood the warning. A smaller force had destroyed a larger one. Confidence had failed. Tradition had failed. Preparation had won. Quiet discussions followed in royal courts. Generals questioned old tactics. Heavy cavalry was no longer trusted blindly. Terrain, weather, and timing became subjects of serious planning. Agincourt proved that arrogance could be fatal. It showed that war was changing, whether nobles wished to accept it or not. After Agincourt, armies began to adapt. Leaders studied ground before fighting. Infantry became more important than ever before. Discipline mattered more than noble birth. Soldiers were trained to hold formation, not chase glory. Heavy armor slowly lost its place as the center of warfare. Agincourt had exposed its weakness. The battlefield no longer belonged to knights alone. It belonged to those who understood reality. War became less romantic and far more unforgiving. The age of heroic charges was fading, replaced by planning and pressure. Agincourt still matters because it reveals how history truly turns, not through destiny alone, but through human choice. The French were not doomed. They made decisions. The English were not invincible. They adapted. One army trusted tradition. The other trusted preparation. On that muddy field, those choices collided. Power proved fragile. Strength failed when it refused to change. Agincourt reminds us that victory often belongs to those who understand their limits, not those who ignore them. Agincourt was not magic. It was not luck. It was preparation, patience, and fear working together. Mud defeated steel. Discipline defeated pride. The battlefield punished arrogance and rewarded understanding. Knights who believed themselves untouchable were pulled into the ground like anyone else. In one morning, an old way of war collapsed. History did not move forward gently. It shifted violently, dragging nations with it. Agincourt stands as proof that even the strongest systems can break when they refuse to adapt. The Battle of Agincourt ended in silence, but its echo still reaches us. It teaches a hard lesson. The strongest army does not always win. Sometimes history is decided by ground, patience, and fear. Sometimes one bad choice is enough to destroy generations of power. If you want more true stories of wars that shape the world, subscribe to this channel. And tell me in the comments, was Agincourt a moment of genius or arrogance punished?